Hello, everyone. Happy last live stream of the year. I have a cool guest with me here. That's Phil. And we're going to talk about subscriptions and we're going to talk about AI and we're going to drink some tea. So, before we get started, as per tradition, let me know what's in your cup and where you're from. I am drinking peach tea today. And I discovered that it's not just peach, it's peach and orange and some other stuff. And it's just yummy and delicious. And I'm here in New York City. It's cold here. Winter has definitely arrived. I mean, kind of right on cue, so that makes sense. Phil, where are you from? What's in your cup? And
Well,
also
I'm
for
from
the
Minnesota
audience.
originally. I've got my Timberwolves hat on here, as Ariel, Frank, and I were talking about earlier. But I live in Colorado now, so I'm based in Boulder, Colorado. Colorado. I'm looking out at the Flatirons right now, which is the beginning of the Rocky Mountains, and we have our first big snowstorm of the year. So there's already like half a foot of snow on the ground, which,
Ooh.
being in Minnesota, I'm fine with. I actually love snow, and I'm a big snowboarder. And as far as
Ah,
what's in my,
okay.
I mean, I'm not as interesting as you, Ariel. I don't have peach tea. I've just got black coffee, but it's good.
Okay.
It's good coffee. So.
That's really all that
Uh,
matters. I think that's a good starting point, ultimately.
I agree.
I used to drink a lot more coffee. I used to do like one or two espressos a day, and I
Yeah,
decided it was too much. Like I would
yeah.
wake up immediately to the espresso machine, and I didn't like that, so I quit cold turkey about a month ago. Let's see how long that
Oh,
lasts.
good for you.
Thank you.
Good for you.
So,
Yeah,
but I'm
I'm
still on
usually
tea.
a one cup guy. Every morning, start my day with a cup of coffee when I get in the office.
Yeah. You know, the thing is, I like the taste of coffee, so I don't need it to wake up. I don't need it beyond just I like brewing it. I like the act of making it. I like the whole thing, the grinding of the beans, the smell of the coffee. But I can
Yep,
drink a coffee at like 4 in the morning and then go to sleep 30 minutes later. I've done that too
yep.
many times, especially writing the newsletter. I can write really well after 1 a.m. Not sure why.
Wow. I do not share that skill.
It's not a skill, it's a curse. That's the
I was
way I
gonna
see
say
it now.
I'm an early bird, not a night owl.
Yeah, no, I'll still wake up at 6:30 and still do some stuff. But no, I try not to do that anymore. Those days are behind me.
Yeah, got to get
So
that sleep.
let us know what's in your cup and where you're from. We're gonna get started very, very soon. Just waiting for more people to shuffle in. And like I said, this is the last live stream of 2025, which is wild. I think I've done the most live streams this year than any previous year before. And I think we're going to do more next year. Maybe I'll get to one a week. It's going to be pretty exciting. Ooh, oat milk latte in New York. Nice. Barcelona with a nice espresso. So you see, I'm not the only espresso drinker, clearly. And I think it's not that it's unhealthy. I think just the act of me wanting it, like needing it, was the problem, even though I don't need it to wake up. That's why I quit. But we'll see how long that lasts. So as we wait for more people to shuffle in, let us know where you're from and what's in your cup in the comments. We have a really cool topic today and a really cool discussion. I saw Phil give a presentation. I saw Phil give a bunch of presentations on subscriptions over the last year plus. And I think this is going to be a really interesting one, especially talking about how to involve AI. And we're not talking about how to vibe code your way into making millions of in-app purchases. That's not the key of today's conversation. We're going to be talking about how you can actually leverage AI in ways that will help you make your app make more money. It's clever and it's the kind of stuff that just works. And I think that's the future. I mean, I have so many thoughts on AI and its place right now, what it could evolve into, which we'll probably get to touch on later. But even understanding the basics of subscriptions and how to motivate people to subscribe to your app is such an important foundation that a lot of people just glaze over and they kind of feel like they'll subscribe, right? Because it's a subscription app. It's like, no, not really. So we're going to be talking about that. We have some Madrid with boring water. Water is not boring. Water is healthy. Continue drinking water, please, out there in Madrid. Hibiscus tea in New York. A lot of tea drinkers. I don't know if I bring that out in people now that everyone knows that I have tea in my cup, but I like it. So I think it's time. I think we're ready to get started. So let me just make sure that I'm on the right screen. I have too many screens and too many mice. Mice. And that's become normal for the live streams for me to lose my mouse and move between screens. I will do that less. Okay. So I see users are climbing, viewers are climbing. Let's get started. Hello, everyone. Welcome to a brand new episode. This AF Chat. We're going to talk about subscriptions and AI and making more money. I have Phil here with me. And Phil has been talking about subscriptions for a long time, saying pretty interesting things. And he even has a little slide deck to share with us. So we're going to be talking about that. But Phil, please introduce yourself. Tell the viewers who you are, what you've done, and why they should listen.
Sure. Yeah, and Ariel, is the slide deck up yet, or you want me to hold off on that?
Hold off on that for now, unless you want it on the screen.
No,
You
no,
let me
no,
know.
that's fine.
Okay.
Yeah, so a little bit of background on me. So my name's Phil Carter. I've spent most of my career in consumer technology. So I started my career at Bain, did management consulting for a few years. Pretty quickly realized I didn't want to be a partner at a management consulting firm for the rest of my life. And so I spent about a decade in venture capital. I was an associate at Trinity Ventures doing early stage consumer mobile investing from 2013 to 2015, and then moved to Colorado, which is where my wife Ashley is from. We've spent the last decade here in Boulder, as I mentioned before. Spent 7 years leading product and growth teams at three multi-billion-dollar companies. So Ibotta, where I was the first product manager, it's one of the few homegrown Denver consumer tech success stories. So that was a fun ride. Went to Quizlet, built the growth product team at Quizlet from the ground up, and then spent a year at Fair leading international category and upmarket expansion. And then a little more than 2 years ago, went off on my own and started Elemental Growth, which is a growth advising and consulting firm that specializes in helping what I generally say seed to Series C consumer and prosumer subscription businesses accelerate their growth. And so I can say a little bit more when we pull the slide deck up around some of the companies we work with and some of the work we do, but that's me in a nutshell.
That was pretty cool. And that was really fast. That was like a speed intro to Phil. I like that.
Try to
I'm gonna have to practice that for myself. I don't do as brief of an intro. But cool. Do you want to kickstart it? Should I bring up the slide deck and let's jump right
Yeah,
into
let's
it?
do it.
Okay,
Let's
we're
do
gonna
it.
bring up the screen, and screen is up. How AI is changing consumer growth playbooks.
All right. Yeah, so as Ariel mentioned, I've given a version of this talk in a few different settings. I think I was at App Promotion Summit in New York, Ariel, when we
Mm-hmm.
discussed the presentation the first time. But I've given it at venture capital summits and a couple other settings. And the reason that I think it's such an important topic right now is because consumer subscription apps are easy to launch but hard to scale for reasons that I'll talk about more in a minute here.
Mm-hmm.
And I think AI is creating a lot of new opportunities for people creating consumer apps that are monetizing through subscriptions, but it's also creating some additional headwinds and challenges. And
Yep.
so the focus today is going to be some of the specific ways that AI is changing playbooks for consumer subscription app growth. As far as my background, I already covered this, so I don't need to go back into it, but I've spent the last 10 years in consumer tech and am now leading Elemental Growth, which is a growth advising consulting firm focused on consumer subscription apps. We work with some of the category leading consumer subscription apps from the last big wave, chess.com, Outside, Imprint, Preply, and a number of others. And then increasingly, we're working with a lot of consumer and prosumer AI apps. And so some of these names you've probably heard of, Perplexity, Gamma, 11 Labs,
A little bit.
and a few others. What was that?
A
A
little
little
bit,
bit,
you know.
yeah. Yeah, some of those first few are pretty big name companies. And the last few maybe you haven't heard of, but you will be hearing about them soon if you haven't already, because some of these companies are growing really fast. So that's my background. As far as the agenda for today, so I'm going to start with just a little bit of background on something I call the subscription value loop, which is basically a framework for how the best consumer subscription apps grow. But I'm also going to share some data on why scaling a subscription app is difficult, particularly a consumer subscription app. And then I think we're going to pause every few minutes and sort of open it up for discussion. So Ariel can sort of guide me on that. But once we've laid that as a foundation, then we'll spend the rest of the time going deeper on the three steps in the subscription value loop, which are value creation, value delivery, and value capture, and specifically 5 tactics for each of those 3 steps that are being influenced by AI. So that's the agenda. I'll jump into the first section, which is really just some context on the subscription app economy, which Ariel probably knows more about than I even do. And then, and then why it's easy to launch these apps, but hard to scale them.
Mm-hmm.
So since Apple and Google introduced subscription business models to the app stores over a decade ago, there has been a huge proliferation in consumer subscription apps. So there are now more than 100,000 subscription apps across both of the major app stores. Most of them confined to about a dozen categories: health and wellness, productivity, ed tech, and a number of others. But when you drill down, of those 100,000 plus apps, it's probably approaching 200,000 now. There have been fewer than 50 consumer subscription apps that have ever reached billion-dollar valuations, and fewer than 10 that have ever surpassed $10 billion valuations. Now, this list is from a Lenny's guest post that I wrote last year, so it excludes some of the rapidly rising AI companies. But even if you throw those in, there isn't a very long list here. And then even if you drill down further and you look at the companies that have actually gone public, so companies like Bumble, Chegg, Dropbox, Duolingo, Grindr, and a number of others that have been around longer, even these companies have seen a lot of volatility in terms of their
Hmm.
revenue multiples over the last few years. Obviously, these companies did very well during the pandemic. There was all sorts of tailwinds around stimulus spending, and people weren't spending as much money on food or travel. But then coming off of the pandemic, all of those tailwinds subsided. There was a mini recession. Their multiples plummeted. And then over the last couple of years, they've started to recover. But this just goes to show that it doesn't get any easier as a consumer subscription app founder, even if you're one of the lucky success stories.
Hmm.
So why is that? I mean, relative to other models like B2B SaaS or consumer marketplaces, consumer subscription apps, generally speaking, can launch faster and with less capital. They don't require sales teams for the most part. They have fast purchase cycles. Most of them don't have to deal with marketplace dynamics, low marginal costs for adding additional subscribers. They have high gross margins, and those gross margins often improve as the company scales. And then they can leverage the app stores for global distribution and turnkey support. And so there are all these built-in advantages to launching one of these apps very quickly. And with AI now, what you mentioned vibe coding earlier, Ariel, like it's becoming easier than ever for anyone, even somebody non-technical, to launch an
Hmm.
app very quickly using AI.
Absolutely, and that's happening. We're seeing that. I'm actually writing about that for the newsletter. So in the next few days, I'll share some of the data from the App Store, and the surge is pretty big, the biggest in like 9 years.
It doesn't surprise me. And that's such a positive thing in many ways, right? It's
Hmm.
democratizing the playing field. More and more people are now able to create their own apps in a matter of weeks or even days. But the flip side of that is the app stores are becoming even more competitive. And the
Hmm.
major paid acquisition channels like Meta and Google and TikTok used to acquire users for these apps are becoming even more competitive. And this gets to why consumer subscription businesses are really hard to scale. So number one, finding users is hard. Why? Well, because the app stores are crowded. So it's
Hmm.
not when the app stores first launched in 2008, 2009, 2010, all you had to do was list your app, and there weren't that many of them. And so
Yep,
you could get
exactly.
organic app store search. Nobody really does that anymore. And even if
Hmm.
they do, there's so many competitors. So finding users is hard, and oftentimes these companies end up resorting to paid ad spend on Meta or Google to acquire users. But as I said before, those channels are getting so crowded that it gets
Hmm.
to be very expensive to pay CAC. Keeping users is hard. The average subscriber retention for a consumer app is much, much lower than for a B2B app, obviously.
Hmm.
Consumers are fickle and they have lots of available substitutes. And so churn rates tend to be higher. And then monetizing users is hard. So within B2B SaaS,
Hmm.
there's this concept of net revenue retention, right? Like even if you have a certain number of accounts churn, if your best accounts add more seats or they upgrade into higher price subscription plans, you actually end up with greater than 100% net revenue retention, meaning you're more than offsetting the churning accounts by upgrading
Yep.
your retained accounts. But that doesn't really work for most consumer subscription apps because you only have a single subscription tier and it's
Hmm.
not a business, individual consumer.
Yeah, you don't need any additional things. You need the one thing, and that's it.
Exactly. Yeah, and you are seeing some apps like Duolingo just launched Duolingo Max a couple of years ago based off of all the new AI features they added to the product. So you are seeing more and more examples of consumer apps that are further along, experiment with multiple tiers, but it's much harder to do than a
Yeah,
B2B.
absolutely. And I think we'll see. It'll take another few years, and at least until most apps do this sort of thing, where B2B had that forever.
Totally. Yeah, totally agree. So you don't just have to take my word for it. You can look at the data. So Revenue Cat has this annual report they put together where they look at data from, I think in the 2025 report, it was about 75,000 consumer apps using their SDK. And if you look at the data on trial start rate, trial conversion rate, install to paid, monthly plan retention, and annual plan retention, a couple of numbers stick out here. So even at the 75th percentile, meaning even if you're in the top quarter of apps in terms of your metrics performance, fewer than 6% of installs are converting into subscribers, and then more than half of annual subscribers are churning after 1 year, and more than two-thirds of monthly subscribers are churning after 6 months. And so this just isn't good enough for a venture scale business. Now, if you're a solo developer or you vibe coded your own app, like this probably works, right? Because you don't have outside funding and you can build a sustainable business off of numbers that aren't great. But if you're a venture-backed business, then you really need to get into the top decile or even the top 5%, because that's when you start to see numbers that can support a venture scale business. So what this chart is showing, same data set, but at the 90th percentile, you see significant outperformance. Install to pay conversion goes up to 12%, 6 month monthly subscriber retention is at 46%, and then 1 year annual subscriber retention is at 58%. So these are the numbers you're aiming for, which means you want to aim to be in the top 10%. How do you get there? Well, obviously it's a lot more complicated than this, but this is a framework that I talk about in my Maven course. I have a course that I teach in consumer subscription across both Maven and Reforge. And the foundational framework to the course is the subscription value loop. So the idea here is the best subscription businesses are built on a unique and enduring core value promise that sits at the center. It needs to be unique because of what I said earlier, there's just so many competing apps now that you have to have something that really sets you apart.
Mm-hmm.
And it needs to be enduring because subscription models depend on long-term retention. That's the foundation for everything else. And then around that core value promise, you have these 3 steps: value creation, which is typically led by core product teams; value delivery, which is about getting the value of your product into the hands of users. That's led by marketing and sometimes growth product or sales teams. And then value capture, which is led by growth product or monetization teams. And that's all about getting pricing right, paywall optimization, and that sort of thing. So the better you get at these 3 steps, the higher LTV over CAC ratio gets, and the faster your payback period becomes. And it just leads to a much faster growing and more sustainable business. So I'll wrap up this section by saying, I mentioned a year ago, I wrote this guest post for Lindy's newsletter called The Subscription Value Loop, and it talked through about 10 different specific proven tactics for growing consumer subscription businesses, which I briefly highlighted here. But today, what I want to do is revisit this framework and talk about how some of these tactics are changing in the wake of AI. And so we're specifically going to drill down into each of the 3 steps: value creation, value delivery, and value capture, and talk about 5 more AI specific levers that I'm seeing companies use. Some of these companies are clients we work with directly, others are just the companies I've observed. But I'll pause there.
Perfect. Wow. Okay. That was packed. That was intense. That was really, really intense. I should have said before we got started, if anyone has any questions, drop them in the chat. We'll get to them as we pause through these sections, or just as we talk. I don't have any problems interrupting, so that should be pretty easy. But one of my questions, and I think one of the foundation to a lot of this is make a unique app. And when you say make a unique app, that has a ton of different things, and that relies on research, that relies on ideas, that relies on making sure that you know what your competitors are doing. Do you have any quick tip for what is unique at this point in 2025, almost 2026?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's such a good segue. I'll give a teaser, but then I'll jump back. So the very first tactic I'm going to talk about under value creation is building an automagical experience and a user's first session. And what I mean by that is AI has created this new window of opportunity to give consumers an experience that they've never seen before, that hasn't really existed for quite a while in consumer, right? Like, there have been other mini waves within consumer tech over the last 15 years, but I would argue that it hasn't been since the launch of the iPhone all the way back in 2007 and the subsequent 3 to 5 year period, when there was this mega shift in what consumer technology could deliver to consumers. And so I think it was really hard for a long time to have a unique value promise, right? If you're another fitness app, how are you going to outcompete Strava in fitness tracking? You can't, because Strava was one of the first movers. They've got a really strong team. They've got a lot of resources, and they have this built-in network effect where people love using Strava and they love the community. But now with AI, there are opportunities to break those strangleholds across all sorts of categories. There's also opportunities to create entirely new categories. And it can lead to both startups that have a path to an eventual IPO, but it can also lead to really attractive acquisition outcomes. And I mentioned Strava before, so I'll bring up Runna. Runna is an AI native running app that focuses on more serious runners who are training for races. Strava recently acquired them earlier this year in May. And a big part of why they acquired them is because they filled a critical gap in Strava's offering that was made possible in part by new AI capabilities.
All right, so we have a question from the chat. Well, not really a question. People are saying that you talk really fast. I think they're asking us to slow down. We'll slow down. Okay, we'll slow down.
It's all the coffee. I should be drinking tea.
Yeah, exactly. That's why I cut down on the espresso, so people understand me. Someone mentioned in the chat that almost every indie they meet has a fitness app or a wellness app or an AI note-taking app. And that's interesting because I think I'm on the same boat. Every time when I do a live stream and I look at apps, we have habit trackers. Everyone has a habit tracker at this point. But that actually goes back to what you were saying before. I think AI note takers are such an easy niche because it's such a needed thing. You talk into your phone, it turns it into something legible. as opposed to just transcription apps, which are good, but don't really have any sort of logic on top of it. So just words, and usually they're gibberish. And so ultimately, that's one of those things that now AI can enable. They're really, really easy. And it created a category that didn't exist before. And that's why everyone is going after them. The same thing that I see is coin finders and plant finders and really all the finders. There's a sound finder. There is, I did a blog post on this a while back. It's everyone who needed some sort of a finder made it into an app, and then everyone else copied them, which is one of those things that are going to be, I think, the things that we see again and again and again. And like you said before, that's a great opportunity for someone, especially if you're not looking for venture backing and you're not looking to take this to billions, and you just want to build something nice, a lifestyle business, which I think in some communities feels like a bad thing. But in some others, I've met multiple indies who have made this into their full-time job, and they're still working from home with their families. They're happy about what they have. They don't want to go beyond that. They don't want to hire employees. They just happy. They're just happy. Maybe I need some coffee. So it's one of those things where, because AI is making it so easy, yes, you do have more competition. You also have more opportunity, but that's why you need to listen to this live stream even more, because once you get that download, you really want to get as much as you can out of it. And I talk about this in my talks. The talk that I gave at Promotion Summit was about how hard it is to get a download. But once you get the download, you can unlock almost infinite revenue once you're in on a person's phone. Not infinite, but then it's really up to you to engage them and bring them back and create value, which is exactly what we're going to be talking about in the next section. So I think it's time. I think let's jump right into the next section. So we start talking about this.
Sure. Yeah, so let's start with the 5 tactics related to value creation. And I start with value creation intentionally because it's the foundation for everything else, right? If you don't have value that you've created, then you can't deliver it, and you can't
Yeah.
capture value back from consumers in the form of subscription revenue or ad
Plainly
revenue if you
said,
have a.
no one cares if you don't have value, if you don't add value.
Yeah. So it all starts with value creation. And of the 3 steps that we're going to talk about today, I think value creation is the one that's being most obviously impacted by AI, right? Just because there are so many new products to be built in a world where you have AI at your disposal.
Mm-hmm.
So the first example I'll give here, this comes from an app called Tolan. They recently announced their Series A. I believe it was Coastland Ventures that led it. This is one of our clients. And
Nice.
Tolan is an AI companion. It's so it's like an alien companion that is meant to be sort of your best friend. Unlike Replica or some of the other AI companion apps out there, there's no romantic angle here. This is their target demographic is Gen Z women, so they tend to really do
Okay.
well. Women ages 16 to early mid 30s. And their onboarding experience is one of the best that I've seen in a very long time. In part because they've just executed the basics really well, right? You come in and they deliver value within the first 30 seconds. They introduce you to this world called Portola, where the Tolan alien companions live. There's a character called the Oracle that asks you about yourself and builds a custom personality profile based on your responses. And then you get matched with this Tolan companion based off of your personality profile. And so in the span of a few minutes, you're getting this experience that I at least had never seen anywhere else, right? And there's so many facets to it. There's understanding more about yourself through how AI interprets your personality, and then there's meeting and connecting with your AI companion in the form of this Tolan. So that's what I mean when I say building an automagical experience. It's like something that feels almost magic because it couldn't have existed before without AI. As far as specific tips, deliver value in the first 30 seconds. I talked about that before. Leverage AI to give users something they've never seen before and make it really easy for them to share. So that's another big one is if there's a natural opportunity to encourage the user to invite friends, then it makes sense to do that sooner rather than later in the user journey because it will help with organic growth.
Absolutely. I actually, if you can go back one slide, one of the things that I think most users are going to be, or should take away from this, if they haven't already, most of the viewers, is deliver value in the first 30 seconds. And that's one of those pieces of advice that sounds so generic. Deliver value very early on, but it's so important to do. It's the same for when you're making a video, when you're making a website, when you're making an app, when you're making a paywall, really when you're making anything, when you're putting anything in front of a user. Is there anything specific that you think of all the value that an app can provide that you really want to show off? Should you show off what you think is the most important part of the app, kind of the star feature of the app? Or do you think it's more about asking users really fast what they want, then showing them specifically that, as long as your app has multiple features? Like, how would you approach that?
Yeah. So I'll touch on a couple things that you hinted at there. One is be careful about just jumping straight at it. Oftentimes, the best marketers and product growth is very similar to marketing, especially in the onboarding flow, because you're winning over a new customer. They lead with an emotional appeal and they follow it up with a logical appeal. So in this
Okay.
case, if you just bury the user in those precious first 30 seconds with, you're going to get unlimited memory and
Yep.
you're going to be able to journal every day. It's like, well, that's the means to the end. But the end is feeling less lonely, feeling like you have a trusted friend who you can go to for advice on
Yeah.
important things in life, getting homework help, right? There are all these use cases. Ultimately, you want to appeal to the user's emotional need and then back that up with the specific features.
Yeah.
So that's point number one, is leading with the emotional appeal and backing it up with the logical
I
appeal.
like that.
Point number two relates to a question you raised around the onboarding quiz and like, to what extent is it better to just deliver value immediately versus asking the user a handful of questions that will help you to better understand who that user is and how to specifically build the product for them. And one of the things I'm going to talk about in a moment here is hyper personalization and the ability for AI to hyper personalize experiences for individual consumers. But to briefly address your question now, I would say how long that onboarding quiz needs to be is highly dependent on the nature of the product. So I wrote a LinkedIn post a little over a year ago that compared AllTrails on one end of the spectrum and Noom on the other. AllTrails has a very short onboarding flow because most people discover AllTrails on the web through Google search. They end up with a hyper local search result that tells them about a hike in their area. They don't really need the app unless
Mm,
they're on the trail and they want to record their experience, in which case, if they open your app for the first time, chances are they're on the trail and they're ready to go. And so you want to get out of their way. Noom is on the other end of the spectrum because in many cases, people using Noom have tried lots of other weight loss solutions and they haven't
mm.
worked. So they need to be convinced that this is going to succeed where other weight loss solutions have failed. And I mentioned my podcast earlier, but we did an episode with the head of product growth at Noom few weeks ago, and he talks a lot about this, about their sort of infamous onboarding flow, but why it's so effective for them.
Interesting. We'll link to all of those, to the LinkedIn post, to this, and also to your newsletter and your podcast in the description below so people can check that out later.
Great. All right, should I keep going?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, so tip number two is just optimizing memory to ensure that apps have the context to offer a great UX. And obviously, this is one that you need to be thoughtful about because the larger the context window, the more expensive the underlying compute cost often is for these algorithms.
Yep.
And so you need to think about your use case and just how good memory needs to be. But to go back to Tolan as an example, like if you're building a relationship with this new AI companion over the course of your first week, and then all of a sudden it forgets your daughter's name, like that's not necessarily a great experience, right? And so you need to think about what the emotional need is for your customer, and then make sure that you've structured your AI solution in a way that supports that need. So specific tips here are tune responses based on prior activity, align the context window to your use case, balance performance versus cost. We're going to talk about value capture later. So this is the value creation side of it, but on the capture side, you got to be aware of cost. And then allow users to pay for better memory. And again, we'll talk about AI credits and other clever ways AI companies have found to supplement subscription revenue with AI credits when we get to the value capture section. Third one here is hyper-personalization. So I mentioned this briefly in the context of Tolan when you asked me about the onboarding quiz. I also mentioned Run It earlier as the company that got acquired by Strava this spring. And so, if you go back 10 or 15 years, there was virtually no personalization. You open up an iPhone or Android app and it's getting the same experience. Over the last decade, companies have gotten more and more sophisticated about adding some degree of personalization to the experience, but still it tended to be like you're put in a handful of buckets.
Yep.
Well, now with AI, you don't need to be a persona anymore. Like you can have a hyper personalized experience that's tailored specifically for you.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, exactly what this looks like depends on the product and the category. For Noom, it might be a specific weight loss goal on a specific timeline. For Runna, it might be a specific race target that you're aiming to achieve for your next upcoming race. But the point is, the more hyper personalized the experience is, the higher your activation rate is likely to be. And that leads to higher trial start, trial conversion, subscriber conversion, retention rates.
It's very similar to what I talk about when I do app screenshot teardowns. And so if you show someone an experience that is not exactly what they're looking for, even if it's somewhat aligned but not exactly, your chance of getting them to download the app drops significantly. And so you always want to put the app in their context. And it makes sense. It would have to be a part of the app as well. Always bring someone into an experience that they want, nothing else really. And like you said, 10 years ago, that was almost impossible. Even up to a few years ago, it was impossible. And I think today with the AI, depending on the app, it's the kind of thing you have to tweak and you have to really work on. And you have to really get to know your users through reading their reviews, talking to them in real life, understanding what other apps they're using so you can get the experience. But once you can calibrate to that point, then I think you have something really strong on your hands because they feel like you know them, you get them. And when you get them, why wouldn't they use your app? That's the way to go. Why wouldn't they pay the app that gets them?
I think that's exactly right. And it's an extension of the core value promise. You talked earlier around, well, with all this competition, how do you actually create a unique value promise?
Mm-hmm.
The obvious way is like creating a new AI experience that's never existed. But I think hyper personalization is one of those less obvious things where making the app feel like it is speaking directly to you, Ariel, not customer
Exactly.
number 1036,
Mm-hmm.
has a significant impact on the emotional connection you build with it.
Absolutely.
And then another example I'll give on the unique value promise point. You talked about AI note takers earlier,
Mm-hmm.
and I actually think it's such a great example. So I chose Granola here. I don't know how many folks tuning in have used Granola. It's my favorite AI note taking app or call recording app. This sounds trivial, but to me, what they really got right before anyone else was figuring out how to have it in the background, but in ways that felt like they weren't sort of shady or in a legal gray area, right? Because you have all these other note takers like Fireflies that announce themselves and they show up as like a guest in the Zoom room. But that can be really off-putting if you haven't given somebody permission to have have the app there. And
Yeah.
so I think Granola figured out this way to have it exist in the background, but in a way that was legally compliant. And that's been a huge part of their breakout success. The other thing I call it here is, and this is especially important for them because they are in the background, using extrinsic triggers to help users form habits quickly. So push notifications to nudge users, asking users to install a widget on mobile. Duolingo has done this recently. More and more apps are doing it. Tolman does this. And then incorporating a visual component on the web. And so when you're recording a call with Granola, you've got this really little icon that appears on your screen and it has the little green record button. And so you sort of know that it's going on there in the background. It's only for you, other people don't see it. But it's a good reminder. Another example would be like Grammarly's watermark. There are all these ways that you can just subtly reinforce the habits people are building with your product by building these extrinsic triggers. And then the last one, just to round out this section. So StudyFetch is another client we work with in the ed tech space. Um, and it's one of these teams that, it's a young co-founding team. They're a bunch of college dropouts, but they've moved so fast and they've innovated so rapidly that it's just not only made the core value promise of their product much more compelling, it's also helped with value delivery because they're constantly showing up on social media, in Discord channels, in TikTok, in Reddit, because students love the pace with which they're churning out new features. And so the specific tips here are staying on top of the latest LLM update, prioritizing speed over polish when it makes sense, promoting new launches on social media, especially TikTok, just because there's so much upside there, and then building a community of evangelists who can really promote your product. And that rounds out our section on value creation.
Great. That was so much there. I think this could have been just one live stream, just talking about this, because there's so many little things that I really want to touch on. But I think we have to continue to value delivery because things are getting more interesting there, and I really want to get to the deep dive if we have time. We have time, so we should be able to. So let's jump into value delivery. If there are any questions, I'll bring them in later.
Sounds great. I also should say this: the pricing and packaging was from a longer version of the presentation. If we
Yeah.
want to leave time for that, I can pull up a different version of this and we can briefly touch on it.
Let's see if we
But
get there.
Okay, we can see if we get there. All right, so on value delivery, um, I would say, especially if you're an independent developer or you have a small team and you're bootstrapping, this is really, really important. And I think
Hmm.
the challenge that a lot of small teams or solo developers run into is they do a really good job building this amazing product, but then they can't figure out distribution. Or they figure out distribution, but they can't figure out how to get enough revenue back from customers to have a sustainable business, which we'll
Yeah.
talk about in the next section. So I'll go through these fairly quickly in the interest of time, although I'm going to try not to talk too fast. The first tip here is just leveraging PLG, that's product-led growth loops, to further amplify viral word of mouth and/or SEO. And so the example I'm using here is Gamma. This is one of the fastest growing AI companies in the world right now, specifically within AI presentations. We worked with them for almost a year, mostly in 2024 up to the beginning of this year. And one of the things we worked on with them was these organic growth loops. So personal viral loop, meaning I'm inviting other people to Gamma because it makes my own experience on the product better. And for a prosumer app like Gamma, this often is in the form of coworkers. There's the social viral loop, which is I'm posting about Gamma on social media because I want other people to see me as an early adopter because there's social cachet that comes with that. There's the casual contact loop, which is unusual. This doesn't apply to most companies, but for Gamma, if you go to a presentation, if you go to a conference like App Promotion Summit where Ariel and I met, or you're just at a board meeting or you're at a team meeting at your company and somebody's giving a presentation with Gamma and it's somebody that you respect and look up to, chances are you're going to decide maybe I should check out that product myself. And then the last one is UGC driven SEO and increasingly UGC driven GEO or generative engine optimization, just sort of the AI equivalent of SEO. And so all of these are loops that existed before, but I think AI is creating new and creative ways to tap into these. Second example is investing in community to drive organic growth through UGC. I had Rachel Hepworth, who was the CMO at Notion for 4 years on my podcast early on this year. She's one of my first guests. And she talked about how, because Notion was such a horizontal product, it was really important for them to invest heavily in early adopter evangelists and online communities on YouTube, in Reddit, and other forums, because it really helped new users of the product understand what they could do with Notion. And then when they launched Notion AI, Notion was one of the really first movers into AI. They got early access to ChatGPT around 2003 or 2023. And the community became an engine for accelerating adoption of their AI features all over again. And so specific tips here are empowering early adopters to explain and evangelize your product, incentivizing your highest performing influencers financially or through other non-financial incentives like just promoting them in their channel, and then creating digital artifacts that can be easily shared on social media. So for Notion, this was in the form of templates, AI templates that you could use to take advantage of their AI features. Third example is Ladder. So Ladder is one of the fastest growing, it might actually be the fastest growing fitness app in the US right now, specifically in strength training, and they just launched nutrition. And the key to their success was figuring out how to crack TikTok as an acquisition channel. So this was literally my third podcast episode with the CEO, Greg Stewart, and he talks about how they painstakingly figured out how to go through every screen in their onboarding flow and optimize their onboarding quiz so that they could predict the LTV of any given user coming in through TikTok or eventually Instagram and other channels based off of their responses to those quiz questions. And they did a web-based onboarding flow so that they got around app tracking transparency, ATT restrictions. So lots of insights in that podcast, but specific tips here are just hiring lots of micro influencers with authentic stories to generate UGC on channels like TikTok or Instagram, paying them based off of performance, and then converting the best performing UGC into ads just to expand the reach. And so Ladder did this with their coaches. They had all of these coaches that already had large social media followings. Those coaches posted on social media, and that would bring in a very relevant audience that was already interested in that coach, or in some cases, it would bring in an audience that wasn't necessarily interested in that specific coach, but then once they got to Ladder, they could go through a quiz to match them with the right coach.
Well, so an obvious question on this is UGC is hard because going and hiring a whole bunch, an army of influencers takes time, takes a lot of effort, takes money. You can do that with AI. Have you seen any good implementation or a good campaign that uses AI for really AI for UGC? So not real people. Everything is AI generated. And has that really generated similar or same results?
Yeah, more and more companies are trying this, and we've
Hmm.
tried it with a couple of our clients. I think
Okay.
you're starting to see success stories. I will talk about an example in a moment, which
Okay.
is human-generated content, but emphasizing AI features, which has been very, very successful. I
Okay.
would say using tools like VO3 or a number of other tools to be able to create AI-generated UGC, it's getting close to the point where it reliably works. But I think there's in tech, it's easy for us to forget that a lot of people don't like AI,
Yeah.
right? Like there are a lot of humans on this planet who view AI as a fundamental threat to
Hmm.
their livelihoods
Yep.
and their life. And so I think you got to be careful with AI generated content just because right now at least, and I think this will probably change over time as people get more accustomed to it, but right now there can be a negative backlash to it in specific categories.
Well, AI is getting to the point where it's getting better and better, or harder and harder to detect whether it's AI or a real human. Do you think that would make a difference? If I don't know what I'm looking at, would or ask differently, would it be worth for someone who doesn't want to go out and hire an army of influencers to try and spend time getting to the point where their VO3 looks like a human and does exactly what they need to do?
I
Sounds
think it's
like you
absolutely
mentioned.
worth experimenting with. And I would say two more things. One is if you're a indie developer or a small team and you don't have the resources to hire micro influencers, one, AI can be a great substitute, and two, you have a lot less to lose, right?
Yeah.
Because you're not a large venture-backed company where if it gets out that you're creating all your ads with AI, there could be some backlash on social media that could ran to an extent. I mean, even that I'm not that worried about. But yeah, I think for those companies specifically, it makes a lot of sense. And then the second point you made is really important, which is we are approaching the point where it's indistinguishable. And I think as that happens, even the people who are turned off by these AI ads are going to throw up their hands and just say, like, well, I don't even know the difference anymore.
Yep.
People are just going to get used to it, but I don't know that we're quite there yet. I think
We're
we're
not.
still in transit.
I think the main issue is that video generation is one thing and audio generation is another. And when you get into audio generation, there are so many little nuances that most people don't think about because they can't see them, but it changes the way you feel about something you look at. And that's one of those very easy to determine factors of is this real or not? When you hear, for
Yep.
example, a recording that's super clean, which is what AI will generate, no background noise, no cable noise, no air conditioner in the background, none of that. It's too clean, and no one is going to believe you. So I think that's
Yep.
one of those challenges. And I'm assuming companies will come around and will try to make this better. We'll try to wrap VO, whatever it is, 11 Labs. 11 Labs is amazing, but even there, you still have challenges where it sounds like someone recorded this in a bathroom and they don't look like they're in a bathroom in the video. So it doesn't feel great. You can definitely do it. I think if you try really hard, you can definitely do it. But in a year, I think it's going to be so hard because everything is going to be automated.
Yeah. Well, so this is a great segue into tip number four, which is using AI tools to build up to hundreds of creatives. But when I say creatives, I want to make a distinction here between using tools like Suno or 11 Labs to add a soundtrack in the background or to translate English
Hmm.
voice into other languages versus literally having the entire video
Yeah,
be AI generated and having like a synthetic human talking to you. To me, those feel like two very different things. And I
absolutely.
listed VO3 here too. I mean, I think all of these tools are worth experimenting with, but I think the more you go wholesale on everything as AI, the more I just want to surface that at least for now, there is that risk. But
Yeah.
yeah, this is a very effective strategy. And I brought up Runa again as an example here. Photo Room, which I'm going to talk about on the next slide, also does a lot of this. So these companies are generating 400 plus creatives per month.
That's
And
insane.
a big part of how they're doing that is using these AI tools, along with just proven processes for holding creative planning meetings, generating briefs, having a feedback loop, and then reviewing performance and figuring out what's working. And then the last one here is just making sure you're highlighting your AI features to reduce CAC and unlock new markets. So this dovetails nicely with value creation, which we talked about in the last section, but you want to make sure that you're really emphasizing the new value that AI is creating for your product. And an extreme example of this is Photo Room, which already had a big part of their product was background removal or background replacement. But with AI, that just got so much faster and so much higher quality. And so leading with these automagical AI features for them ended up dramatically reducing their CAC across the board,
Oh,
but
wow.
specifically in a few markets that were previously not viable for them because the economics didn't work. And so this is another episode on my podcast that I talked to their VP of growth, but he talks about how Brazil, Indonesia, Mexico, these were markets that weren't previously attainable for them because the paid acquisition costs were too high. But because the engagement with these AI ads was so high, it meant that CACs came way down. Conversion also, I presume, went up. And so
Oh,
that
wow.
led to TB over CAC and faster payback period.
That's wild. So when you say mention your AI features, your automagical features, in my mind, there are two ways to do this. One is to say, we have AI to do X. And the other is, we now do this one thing that might sound crazy, but we can do it. Is there a difference between just throwing AI into everything versus actually talking about the value as in, this is now a reality?
I think the key is show, don't tell. And
Okay.
I won't play these right now, but you can go find these on Meta Ad Library. And what you'll see is they're very short. They're like, in some cases, 5 or 10 seconds long,
Hmm.
but they're showing you exactly how the product works. And obviously, this works
Okay.
better for some companies. But for photo, I mean, you can see there's like a cup in the background here, and it removes the hardwood floors and replaces it with this picnic scene,
Yeah.
right? And so show don't tell is the key. Because if you just say like, hey, we've added AI, it's like, well, everyone's added
Yeah,
AI. But if
exactly.
you show a very specific and unique feature that AI does for your product and make it clear to the user why that's valuable to them, to me, that's a huge game changer.
Absolutely. And that's the same thing we see with App Store optimization. If you just throw AI into your app's name or into your keyword list, no one cares because no one is looking specifically for AI features. Everyone wants the features. So
Yep.
show, don't tell with an app review, show, don't tell with your screenshots, but generally show the value as it is automagical, it is amazing, but it's not that AI is causing this. It's just we built this. We use AI. It's okay. I completely agree that that's the way to do it, even with ads, obviously. So show, don't tell. I like that. Second big thing to take out of this whole presentation: show, don't tell. We're talking about basics here.
That's right. Yeah, first one was deliver value in the first 30 seconds, right?
Hmm.
That was the key for value creation, and then show, don't tell is a key for value delivery. I like that.
Yep.
Any other questions from the audience, or do you want me to wrap up with value capture?
Let's talk about value capture, and we'll bring any other question at the end. I think we're
Okay.
making good
I don't
time.
know that we'll have time for the pricing and packaging deep
So
dive, but
let's
I'm
we'll,
happy
we'll
to
skip it.
save that for another
Okay.
another time.
Sounds good. That's how I'm gonna lock you into another live stream.
There you go.
That's my
There you
trick.
go.
The viewers already know this. I do this to everyone.
I preempted you. Uh, all right, so value capture, and I'll start by saying value capture, I think, is often the most overlooked step in
Hmm.
the value loop. In part because you have to earn the right to capture value in the first place, and so a lot of companies don't even make it this far, right? They never
Yeah.
monetize that, don't create enough value in the first place. But once you do, I think the mistake that a lot of companies make, and especially small teams, is they're so afraid to push far enough on value capture that they end up leaving a lot of money on the table.
Hmm.
And it's easy to say, well, I don't want to frustrate our users, or there should be a free version for everyone. And in some cases, that's absolutely true. But at the end of the day, if you don't have a sustainable business, you can't continue delivering value for anyone. And so this has gotten even more important with AI, specifically because, and maybe this is takeaway number three, if you remember three things, right? There was deliver value in the first 30 seconds for value creation. There was show, don't tell for value delivery. I think for value capture, the message here is you've got to make sure that you're accounting for the underlying costs of the AI features,
Hmm.
right? It used to be the marginal cost to serve a subscriber for chess.com or Strava or Duolingo was basically zero.
Yeah.
But now you have these underlying compute costs, and those compute costs are going down over time as LLMs improve and become more efficient. But they're non-trivial, and in some cases, your power users can use so much compute that they end up becoming unprofitable and costing you a lot of
Hmm.
money. And so, a few tips that all sort of relate to that theme. One is use cheaper, faster LLMs when performance is good enough. So this is John Nerona. He's the co-founder and chief product officer at Gamma. And he talks about how in the early days when Gamma launched in 2023, launched their AI tool in 2023, they intentionally didn't go straight to the fanciest, most cutting edge models. They found models that were cheaper but faster, which both kept their cost structure manageable and it led to faster performance for the end user. And as long as the quality was good enough, that was the right trade off to make.
Yeah.
So, I think multiple LLMs, you can use tools like LM Studio for this, experimenting with open source models, and then just depending on your use case, trading off performance for speed and for cost. Number two, so I alluded to this before. So Duolingo for many, many years just had a single subscription tier, which was Duolingo Plus, and then eventually Duolingo Super. They added Duolingo Max in 2023, and Duolingo Max basically consolidated their three core AI features into a higher price subscription tier. So these were video call with Lily, explain my answer, and role play. And the way that they packaged it was like the immersive language learning tier. back to your point before, Ariel, around people don't care about AI, they care about what AI gets them. So Natalia, who's a director of product at Duolingo, was on my podcast, and she talked about how they originally launched with describing Duolingo Max as the AI tier. But that was at best neutral, if not counterproductive, because people were turned off. If anything, they were turned off by AI.
Hmm.
But when they reframed it around, yeah, it uses AI, but the purpose is not AI. The purpose is immersive
Exactly.
language learning. That shifted it to what is the value I get as a language learner? And as a result, they were able to charge a much higher price and capture a lot more value from customers. So tips here, conduct subscription pricing and packaging analysis. So Van Westendorp, Gabber, Granger, and Max Diff, these are 3 different types of pricing and packaging techniques you can use to optimize pricing and packaging for your subscription. The deep dive that you saw in the agenda goes into a lot more detail on
That's
these
for the next
techniques.
live stream.
Yeah, that's for the next one. But we can say more on that later, or you can find all of these tools online. Identify features with highest popularity and willingness to pay, and segment those off into a second tier. Offer 2 subscription tiers at different prices, and then package AI features into the higher price tier for 2 reasons. One, because they tend to have higher willingness to pay, but also for the reason I said before, which is there are non-trivial costs that you have to cover with those features. Number 3 is just limiting trial links and freemium offerings to minimize AI costs. So, the standard 7-day free trial, you get access to everything as a free user as long as you're in your trial, or the freemium equivalent of that, which is there's no trial, but you get unlimited usage of certain features, or you get up to X number of uses of premium features for free. Well, a lot of companies are having to revisit that now, because if you give away
Hmm.
too much value, then you can lose a lot of money in those 7 days of a free trial from users who are racking up a lot of compute costs and aren't actually paying you anything. And some of those users are never going to convert, right? They're just not serious users.
Yep.
And so tips, consider shorter trials. I believe the limit on iOS is 3 days, so you can't go shorter than 3 day on iOS, but consider 3 day, or if you're on web, you could even go do a 1-day trial. Tightly restrict free product experience, put usage caps on AI features, and then sell additional AI credits as in-app purchases. And this last one dovetails into the next tip. So charging subscribers for AI credits that go beyond a certain usage cap. We mentioned 11 Labs earlier. 11 Reader is their new consumer app. 11 Labs is mostly known as a B2B business that uses APIs for voice. But they have this 11 Reader product that competes with Speechify and a couple of other companies. And so what they have figured out is offering multiple subscription plans with varying amounts of AI features like Duolingo, but then also allowing users to purchase additional AI credits a la carte if they exceed their cap even as a subscriber. And then just making sure they're setting the right prices for those in-app purchases to cover their costs. And then the last one runs contrary to the first 4. So I mentioned that the key theme here is you're accounting for the underlying costs of AI features. But in certain cases, so this is not for the indie developers. This is for the OpenAIs of the world, or maybe in a less extreme case, like the Gammas of the world, right? In certain cases, if you are a venture-backed company and if your market is huge and there's a huge advantage to being a first mover, then it may make sense to actually take a loss on power users for a period of time, just because you're creating evangelists out of those users, you're expanding your market share, and you're sort of sacrificing short-term profitability for the sake of getting maximum market share, which will lead to a much larger business in the long run. So tips here, using those pricing techniques, Van Westendorp and Gapper Granger, to understand willingness to pay, analyzing cost per user based on token usage, identifying power users who may be unprofitable, but then gauging the degree to which those power users are generating value in other ways, and taking a loss on them if it's worth it. And that's it. I'll leave this slide just for folks who want to find me on LinkedIn or elsewhere.
And we'll
That's
link
everything.
to all of those in the description as well, so people can come back and do this later. I'll take the screen off so we can just talk. But man, so much interesting stuff in there. We have 6 minutes to go. We have a few questions from the chat that are kind of coalescing around the same topic of AI, which we just talked about, to show or not to show, to tell or not to tell. Someone asked about a lifetime subscription, which before we even talk about AI, which is probably an absolute hell no. In general, I would say absolutely hell no to lifetime. But I want to bring this back to an actual experience that I have. So I'm working with a developer who built already an app that uses advanced voice from ChatGPT. And for those of you who don't know, the API for advanced voice from ChatGPT from OpenAI is incredibly expensive. Incredibly, like you can't even compare it to any of the other voice AIs that exist out there. And The challenge is none of them are good. So 11 Labs has a really good voice API, and you can do voices, but it's only a voice API. It's a text to speech, and you can do other things to make it work. But if you just purely want to use for with voice, it's just going to be expensive. And going into the app, the idea was that eventually the price will drop just because the prices of pretty much everything else have been dropping. So he built the entire app and got to a point where the price has not dropped. So now he's unable to even offer a free trial because it's so expensive. So either he goes out and gets investors so he can offer a free trial, or he's going to eat the entire cost, which is way too much. So one of the lessons there was think about what you're going to use before you start using it, because it could be a great idea, and his idea was great. And there are better ways to implement the using a text-based AI and then something like 11 Labs and merging them. But after you spend 3 months, 4 months, 6 months working on something, you really don't want to do that when you realize you can't give a free trial. So it's one of those things where don't assume that something will happen. And like you said, check all the prices ahead of time, because I think if you get to a point where you can't offer a free trial or your free trial is limited, you might actually hurt your chances of getting a conversion, especially if you have a really good onboarding and people are really excited and then they can't try it. And because the competition is just rising and rising, they'll say, okay, I'll try this other app. And if I don't like it, then I'm going to go back. But what if they do like it? Or what if it's just good enough? Or what if they're not sure? They're not going to come back. So it's very important to know the cost and understand what you're getting yourself into, because there is this desire to have the app be automagical. And once you start seeing the features, you want them and you want to keep them, but you can't because you can't afford it. So somewhere between there is a really happy medium. And even for venture-backed companies, it's not an infinite black hole of money where you can just shovel money into it and it'll be fine. Eventually, investors will want their return back. So you want to make sure you know the economics and you have some sort of a balance between both the cost and the automagical features.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And that is where context matters so much. You need to understand what your product is. You need to understand who your target customer is and what their willingness to pay is. You need to understand your market size.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say most importantly of all, and maybe this is a good note to start to end on, is we talked earlier around there's no shame in being a lifestyle business or an indie developer that doesn't raise venture capital. In fact,
Mm-hmm.
increasingly, that's what I'm advocating for in my consumer subscription course, because very few consumer subscription apps make it to billion-dollar plus valuations, which is what most VCs want.
Mm-hmm.
And so as long as you internally have a clear sense of what your ultimate goal is and you are making decisions that are aligned with that goal, then I don't think there's any problem with being a little bit more conservative.
Absolutely. I think especially these days, I see more companies get acquired because they were conservative, because they built a revenue, a profit generating app, as opposed to I just have market, I just have users. Users now are not what they used to be 15 years ago, 10 years ago, even before COVID. You could build growth and maybe you would get acquired. But now, if you build a sustainable business, someone will come around and say, not only can I profit off of this, I can merge some of those together and I can make that bigger business that I can then hope to get to $1 billion valuation. And I think that's what we're going to see more of in the coming years, because it's getting easier for someone with an idea to turn it into something that works. I talk to a lot of people. Every time I tell someone what I do, they go, oh, I have an idea for an app. And in most cases, those people are not developers. They don't want to talk to developers. They don't know how to do product management at all. And up until now, they couldn't do anything with those ideas other than just share them with me. One guy even wanted me to sign an NDA a few years ago. Like, yeah, no, I can't help you. But now they can. Now they can go to one of the many vibe coding platforms and at least attempt to. And I've tried all of them. None of them will give you an app that I think is marketable to the point where it can become really profitable. You can probably make an app that makes a little bit of money. You can't really vibe code a lot of the good features. But ultimately, in a year, maybe 2 years, maybe that's going to be a real thing. Maybe we're not going to need to know how to code unless we want to do stuff that's more complicated, or maybe you just need one developer to do the job of 20. And so if my hair guy has an idea for an app that will make his life significantly better, he can go and he can make it happen. And so at that point, we're going to start seeing a bunch of little features packaged into apps. And I can totally see someone coming around and saying, picking this off and this off and this off, making someone's life considerably better with the one exit. And at the same time, also building a lot of wealth for themselves with a much larger sort of company, something that 10 years ago was that's how you do things. So I totally see that as being a real thing. we have I think a minute and a half, not even. But there are two themes that are going on in the chat that we can bring together. One is talking about AI, whether you should and how you should. There's a binge eating, an app to stop binge eating, that's adding AI, and the question is, should I say that we simplify not binge eating with AI? And then another is talking about credits, something I also wanted to bring up. So in the 1 minute we have left, how would you suggest to someone who's bringing AI into their app, what we talked about before, to talk about it?
Yeah, I would go back to the Duolingo Max example, which is
Mm-hmm.
lead with the emotional appeal, follow with the logical appeal. The emotional appeal should not emphasize AI. The
Yeah,
emotional appeal should
absolutely.
emphasize what the customer gets. The logical appeal that lists out the specific features, that's where, okay, on the paywall when they're ready to make the purchase decision after you've gotten them excited in the onboarding flow, okay, then maybe you mention your AI features, but don't lead with it.
Yeah, absolutely true. And same for keyword optimization. If you throw AI into your keyword list, you're just going to get nothing out of them. So you're really ruining your chances to getting discovery on both sides. It's what is the AI doing that's helping me with not binge eating? Does it know when I'm about to binge eat? It just has an algorithm that kind of figures out that I binge eat just after a really exciting live stream because I'm so happy. And if it does, then it tells me to stop. Let me know about that. Don't tell me that AI is going to do it. I don't care. So
Yeah.
that's the same. The other question is about credits, and that's something I'm curious about. Have you worked with apps that use a credit system as opposed to a subscription system, or a subscription that's based on credits? These things get so complicated. I've worked with a bunch of developers who have some sort of a weird hybrid, and then charging and refunds, they become so complicated. What are your thoughts around this?
Yeah, I think so. I mentioned 11 Labs with their new 11 Reader product
Mm-hmm.
is one that is a subscription tier, but then also has AI credits you can purchase on top of that. So I have seen hybrid models like that work. I think the short answer is just make sure it's simple enough for a consumer to understand.
Yeah.
Prosumers, B2B buyers will go through very long feature lists and very complex usage-based algorithms for what they're going to pay. Consumers don't have the time or the patience. In many
Yeah.
cases, sophistication. So the key is just to keep it simple.
Yep, I like that. Alrighty, and we're officially out of time. If there are any more questions, I'll look at them later. So if you still have questions in the minute before I'm going to turn this off, ask them. If you have questions afterwards, ask them in the comments below. I'll go through them and I'll answer them. I answer almost all the questions that I see. So that's pretty much it. Phil, thank you so much for putting together the presentation, for sharing your experience. This was amazing. I think we can do 10 other live streams on pretty much every single bullet point. I have so many more questions than I know the viewers do, so we'd love to have you again in the future. But thank you. Now, what is
Yeah.
your most important channel where people can reach out to you? Is that LinkedIn?
Yeah, I would say three things. So there's my LinkedIn profile. It's just Phil G. Carter. There's my website, which is philgcarter.com. And then there's my podcast, which is called Subversive, and it's available on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. But I would say go to YouTube. That's where the best content.
I agree. Alrighty, so we'll drop links to everything we talked about today: your newsletter, your podcast, your website, your LinkedIn, and as well as all the blog post on the Lenny's blog before. So we'll drop all those so people can see them. And yeah, again, thank you very much, Phil. We'll see you later.
Thank you.
And
Thank you
thank
for
you
having me.
for everyone who viewed today. Hopefully you learned something new. Bye bye.